Can't hear Steve, but I'm presuming that we're ready to. We will make a start. Welcome to the 66th meeting of the Council of Governors. And we'll go straight in with any apologies for absence, Joe or Sally.
Yes, Andy, we've got apologies from Cara Lee, Stacey Washington, Michael Earnshaw, Mark Ellison, Steve Dilworth, Nina Hingaradi Crane, Rachel Clare Evans, Jane Wells, Lisa Thompson, Neil Springham, Lawrence Mack and Sarah Birchall.
Thanks very much. Azra, did you want to come in there?
I did. There's also a report that's due to come in from Grant Thornton, but Joanne cannot make the meeting. That's Joanne Brown, the partner, so Raymond, the manager, will be coming along to talk to that paper.
Okay, thanks very much. So any declarations of interest? Sorry, Sally.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to, I suppose, note that there's quite a lot of apologies, but that is probably due to our having to move the Council of Governors. So I know this is quite an unusual having this number of apologies, but just to note that. And then the other thing was around conflicts of interest, declarations of interest. Obviously, later on the agenda, we have got an item around NED and Chair pay. So we will be asking the NEDs and Chairs to drop off the meeting at that point and then call coming back in. So just to highlight that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. So we're now going to the meetings of the last meeting. Please sing out if there are any matters you want to bring up. Page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Anyone want to bring anything up from there? I don't think we have any matters arising, Joe, from there, do we? I don't think so. No, then if that's the case, we'll just go into a very brief update from me. A lot of the things that are obviously current are going to be covered in our Chief Exec's report, but I thought I'd just give a flavour of what I'm seeing at the moment, and it's nothing that you'll find in any way unusual, is that all the visits that I carry out and fellow NEDs carry out, the themes of demand, consistently high demand, complexity of that demand with a lot of comorbidities, and staffing challenges. These are the three themes that keep coming through all of the time. And of course, part of that staffing challenge is not only numbers of people, but it's also the pressures of both our staff and our patients. The increases, the energy costs, which are obviously going up, fuel costs, and a whole range of things like that, which have an impact not only on our staff, but on our patients, and may, of course, result in a rise in demand for our various services. As we, looking forward to the winter with COVID and flu, we obviously don't know yet what impact that will have, but it's perfectly possible that we're going to face one of the most challenging winters we've had, given that the summer has not really been a summer as far as challenges of demand is concerned. It's been winter pressures affecting all parts of all NHS services. If you will talk briefly about our new Secretary of State and how she's laid out the challenges that we face. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns into reality. But of course, it's not only us that are facing the problems, our partner agencies are under massive pressure. The Met Police have been under a lot of scrutiny of late. They're in special measures on their performance, and they no doubt will be seeking, as other forces will, to offload the pressures they see are not part of their remit, particularly under mental health. I can see they becoming more difficult partners as we go into the future. And our local authorities who provide that vital social care service, again, find themselves under great financial strain. So there's a lot of pressure throughout. I'm not painting a very rosy picture here, but it isn't a particularly rosy picture as we look ahead. Right on the horizon, obviously, the ICS is still in its early days, and we'll be looking to colleagues working together to deal with all of these particular issues. Putting a lot of cash-strapped organisations together doesn't suddenly produce some money, but what it might do is produce some best practice, better ways of working, more coordination, and I certainly hope they will. But what I have noticed, as I always do, despite all of these pressures, the outstanding work of our staff from top to bottom, everywhere I go, there's lots of moans and groans, there is. people have got their concerns. I've not been slow coming forward with those concerns, but it's done on that basis of wanting to do a good job for our patients, and that's what shines through. And again, I'd like to congratulate Iffy and his top team for some tremendous work during very, very difficult times, which I see, on first hand a great deal. So thank you to you all. Any questions for me before we move on to our Chief Exec's report? I can't see any on there. If not, we'll move on over to you, Iffy. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and afternoon, everyone. I think Andy has really picked up on some of the critical things I wanted to talk about this morning, which is that triad of demand, complexity, and staff gaps, which of course has resulted in parts of our services in long waits, which frankly in some areas are much longer than I'd like to see. But of course, I'm grateful to our teams who have continued to find ways to deal with this. And in fact, this morning, a number of us were at the Memorial Hospital, where we welcomed 24 mental health staff. These are recently qualified graduates that we've employed, and that we hope that we can train whilst also deploying their skills. Many of them have come with some skills, I have to say, because they worked in different parts of care and health to support us across 12 of our directorates, the community mental health teams, as well as the acute and crisis mental health pathway. And quite interestingly too, this morning I chaired the South East London People Board, where we discussed what I can only describe as excellent work by a range of people: SLAM, Oxley's, Mind, staff who provide services in mental health, particularly those with lived experience, patients, and who have come together to design a multi-professional competency framework, just thinking about the sorts of training and skills that the sort of people that we received and welcomed to Oxley's this morning will need to be able to carry out their work, which is quite distinct from what professionals like nurses, OTs, physiotherapists, etc., come into the health sector with. And in fact, I did say to them that I'd quite like them to present not just to the ICB, but it may be that they'll come along here to present that work. I thought it was really fantastic work, bringing lots of people together to think about for patients. They were saying, what are the sort of things that I would like someone who is looking after me to know and to be able to share with me? And I thought that was really fantastic work. I want to follow Andy's lead and again thank our staff, and thank in particular our staff network who did an excellent job during our Oxley's Wellbeing Week. I think given the pressures that staff are under, that we mustn't lose sight of the strain, both emotional and physical, that this may result in. And so we've taken time throughout the week, visiting teams, sharing well-being treats. I wouldn't say one nature. I wish there were more bananas and apples, but I was sent along to a few teams with biscuits, which were well received, nevertheless. So that was good. And also we had in the summer a thank you event for our volunteers who not only support users of our services, families, but also our teams. And I thought I ought to again thank them and have this meeting. We've had a CQC inspection of our community mental health teams that finished last week. We haven't heard anything yet, but I think we've got in the diary an opportunity to hear back from them, at least the initial feedback from them this Thursday, and it wouldn't be a few weeks later before we get a report. On the surface of it, it went well. There weren't any serious concerns. They didn't at any point in time call our attention to any safety issues. So I'm really hoping and keeping everything crossed that they will return with a verdict of good services across our Bexley, Bromley and Greenwich community mental health teams. And the final thing I just want to pick up in my report, Andy alluded to the fact that although we say we're planning now for winter, for many of our teams, right across mental community health, and indeed our acute partners, it's kind of been winter pressure right along. You may have heard of the challenges with ambulances, challenges in ED, etc. But we are contributing to the discussions about how we support the process to make sure that things don't get any worse this winter. And we have submitted to NHS England as an ICS a range of things that they've asked for, and we're having discussions locally and within our teams about the sort of work that needs to be done. Joe and I visited one such team last week at Brookhouse, Queen Elizabeth, where we had some discussions about how that team needs to work more closely with Lewisham and Grenade Trust to address some of the challenges with regard to pressures in ED. So that's all I wanted to say, but I'm quite happy to take questions based on my report or indeed anything else.
Thanks very much, Ify. Any questions for Ify at all, please? If not, thanks very much indeed for that report. Sally, just looking, so this is now the part where you want us to, myself and Joe, I presume, is it, to depart?
So if all the Neds except for Joe could go, including you, Andy, and then Joe can present the item about your appraisal and pay, and then I'll email everybody back in a group to come back in.
Okay, thanks very much.
Shall I go ahead, Sally?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's always difficult, this logistical stuff. So I've included a sort of summary appraisal for Andy in the report. It's in a very similar format to the one that Steve James presented last year. Thanks to governors for taking part in the questionnaire that contributed to this. I also spoke to, I think, all the exec and all the NEDs and some external stakeholders as well, most notably the chairs of SLAM and South West London St George's, and also to Richard Douglas. You can see from the report that it is organised in line with the competencies that NHS England like to see an appraisal grouped around. So strategy, partnership, people, professional acumen, and focus on outcomes. And then I've picked up some key points in there. I think in general, as you can see, it's a very positive appraisal. Stakeholders were pretty universally positive about most aspects, actually. If I pick up in strategy, there was some questioning whether Andy could have a more sort of transformational, ambitious strategic focus. And I think, you know, that is something that he and a number of us NEDs grapple with. Although I think a strategy that says he wants us to provide the services as well as we can, you know, to the sort of the best of our ability, and be a leading player, kind of encapsulates his thought process there rather than anything more sort of visionary. But when I checked that with sort of external stakeholders, they didn't seem to see that as any sort of issue at all. Some nice comments on partnership, particularly from the external stakeholders I spoke to. So you can see I've included a sentence there which says, in external meetings, he is not the most vociferous, but his contributions are always strong and valued. What's behind that is a very strong line that at some of the partnership meetings, and I'm thinking of ICS and SLP and such like those, sometimes other people might speak and you wonder what the point is, whereas Andy only speaks when there's a point. So that's what's behind that. And but, you know, and that was very much valued. And in particular, he makes time, as he does with the NEDs, and I'm sure he does with the exec, to actually have really informal chats with people. And stakeholders really valued that. On people, his visibility was praised by everyone, modelling the trust values. That was very positive. A little bit from the exec in terms of sometimes he doesn't always make his point as known as perhaps it needs to be in meetings. So some can sometimes cause the exec to question what he's thinking. So I fed that back to Andy. Professional acumen, that's all really about how he runs the governance of the organisation. There was a particular focus on something that we do struggle with from time to time, which is that balance between operational and strategic. I think on balance, people felt that generally that boundary was right. Events can often cause Andy to move that boundary a little bit, but in general, in balance, that was good. And a really strong focus on outcomes. So very positive appraisal. I did ask some specific questions about the impact of Andy taking the chair at London Ambulance Service. The biggest issue I think there was the fact that he is so visible around the trust. But I know Andy and the exec and communications colleagues are really working on how we can maintain that visibility, perhaps using tools that we haven't exploited to the full to ensure that people don't see a withdrawal from Andy as part of that. Andy feels he can make the job work. He will keep that under view. And I think in general, people were very supportive. So I've included a couple of focus areas for development there. And really, one is external, one is internal, very much external about everything that's going on in the external environment in the ICS and making sure that we can still play a full role in those arrangements and influence things. Internal, all about how we can ensure that as we expand our prison services, and you know, we have already expanded it, and we're now looking this autumn at implementing our services in the southwest of England, making sure that the governance is fit for purpose for that, and that does need further work both within the directorate and across the corporate functions as well. And then also focusing on how users' experience can be featured into our governance structure a bit more, and there's a paper later on about some work that's going on that. So that's my sort of very short canter through the report. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Thanks very much, Jo. That was really helpful.
Joanne, sorry, can I just, because I think, Joanne, the questionnaire was interesting for me to ask, actually, what is the role of a chair? Didn't we? Just reflecting wise. But also, does it evolve? Isn't it? Because in a way, are we seeking someone that's static, or, you know what I mean, safe, and someone that's actually also, as you say, progressive? So it was just a reflective comment. But it was interesting about what do we expect actually, you know, is the role of a chair? And I was wondering whether there was any, I guess, guidance around that going forward, really.
There is guidance, and I think probably we have in the past gone through with governors, you know, as part of induction, but I guess it's a while, you know, since we talked about it. And certainly I can circulate some information, but I think it is that dual aspect of holding the executive to account and making sure that the strategy of the organisation, so looking outwards, but also making sure that we don't forget to look inwards as well. Obviously, the chair has a dual role, both the chair as the Council of Governors and the chair of the Board of Directors. And so particularly the survey that we have with governors is trying to make sure that both those aspects are picked up, and it's quite a broad, you know, role to have. And we just to say that the survey and things is built on national guidance about chair appraisals, and so that's where we've sort of built some of the questions, but tried to use some of the terminology that people will be familiar with. Thank you.
And Sally, I think just to add to that, John, the competency framework, which I guess is one of the things you were thinking you might recirculate, Sally, which the 5 competency domains comes from, but actually has some quite interesting questions underneath in terms of does the chair do this, etc., etc. That was what I used for the more detailed feedback I went through with Andy. So picking up those things. I think there's also, it's how you translate. The chair can have quite an external facing role. So how you translate how the external environment is moving and ensure that the trust is not getting left behind, is exploiting opportunities in that external environment without kind of getting bogged down in the operational as well. I think there's a big feature there. So it was particularly interesting to talk to Richard Douglas about Andy and how he operates in that environment, in the ICS and across that domain, really. And that was quite positive. So for me, that's a big changing. If I go back to, I guess Andy's been chair 7 years and counting now. That external environment, it always remains pressured, but looks quite different, I think, to how it was before, and particularly emphasising partnership working.
And I have got a checklist, I guess, of what a chief exec role is, what a chair role is, which I'll share. But I guess the chief exec is much more the running the day-to-day, and the chair is just slightly outside with that kind of external facing as well. But I'll circulate information to governors, and if at any point governors would like to do a sort of session on this outside of meetings, I'd be very happy to set that up. Ravimbo, I see you've got a question. Would you like to ask Joe?
Thank you, Sally, and also thank you to Joan for the summary you've provided. Obviously, thank you to Andy as well. Joe, I did want to just clarify in terms of, I think it relates to John's question as well, in terms of the role in the evolving, and also just having a bit of clarity in terms of if a governor does present an issue, is it for the governor to provide the solution? I mean, how does the dynamic really work there in terms of the role of the chair in solution finding? Because I understand what you're saying, Joanne, it's more of a grappling process and maintenance work in the climate that we're in. But I just wanted to have a bit of understanding around that.
I mean, I'll start and Sally may want to contribute, but I think if a governor raises an issue, for example, if a governor raises an issue in this format, it would be Andy's role as chair to ensure that that issue is then picked up and hopefully fed back to the governor in question. It's not for him necessarily to answer that issue, it's for the executive to take that issue away and discuss it and provide a response which may be ongoing to the particular governor involved. And I think that comes back to that split that Sally mentioned in terms of there's a running the trust day to day, which is what the executive are there for, and there's the sort of the broader, perhaps more external facing view there. But as chair of this meeting, that would be the issue. And I think in the survey, I think that was covered in the survey from memory, Sally, wasn't it? I think.
I suppose it's where it comes into organising the agenda for these meetings and the things that the council governors spend their time on. And so that's where Andy as chair of the council of governors will pick up issues that are raised to him by governors. And if you remember, we always have the governor to non-exec session before the board meeting, so that's a prime opportunity for issues to be raised. And obviously Sue as lead governor also will. So that's where we kind of would bring forward, if there were issues being raised to Andy that wanted to be discussed by the council of governors, then that would influence the agenda for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions for Joe? If not, can we sort of accept the appraisal? What happens now is that gets shared more widely with the NHS England, who are because the NHS England, they directly appoint chairs of NHS trusts, whereas within foundation trusts, councillor governors appoint chairs, and they collect appraisals from across the country, and then that influences what they put on as development programs for chairs and helps them select chairs in the future. So from the feedback from the meeting today, then I'll share that with NHS England. So if we move on from that one, I've just asked Joe to stay for the item on the Remuneration Committee about the chair's remuneration. If I can bring in Sue as lead governor, who's on the Remuneration Committee, and also Yvonne, who was at the meeting. Maybe Sue, you could just give an overview of the discussion about the chair's remuneration, which is for the decision of the council of governors, and Joe can kind of reflect that as senior independent director as well, because there is a decision for council of governors to make. Thank you.
No, I was fortunate to be able to attend as lead governor for the remuneration committee with Joe there as well. I think the process is very fair. It was quite detailed and looking at what could be done and what is allowed to be done, and to make sure that what was right for Oxleas and for the people involved. And I think it was very beneficial for me to be, well, as a lead governor, to see how that's done. I've done it before as well. But I think I'd like to reassure everyone that the process is very detailed, honest and fair. Unless anyone else would like to add a comment who was there with me. But I think that covers everything. Joe, does it? Or,
yeah, I was just going to pick up that, so NHS, I never know whether it's NHSE or NHSI, have been carrying out a process of convergence between the terms of, for both chairs and non-exec director chairs, between foundation trusts and other trusts. And that process has now completed. So any sort of interim arrangements on that have now completed. So what that leaves you with is some pretty tight guidelines as to remuneration of chairs and non-exec directors, banded, so you sort of get a lower point, an upper point, and I think a medium point from memory, and then that's banded by the size of the trust. And as it says in the paper, since over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's going to increase again with the Southwest prisons, the turnover of Oxleas has increased quite considerably. So whereas previous discussions had Oxleas in one band, we now sit pretty firmly in the next band up. And that, to my mind, has been the major driver for this increase that is recommended in the paper. I was going to say something else, but it's completely lost me there. Oh, the other thing is, in terms of commitment, time commitment, the NHS EI assumption is that a chair of a trust is normally a 2 to 3 day commitment. So because of that, so if you like, that commitment goes hand in hand with the remuneration. With Andy then taking on the LAS chair, which is also a sort of a 2 to 3 day commitment, the two can fit together without seeing a reduced remuneration. So that, I think we were quite reassured by that when we were at committee.
Yeah, can I second that? I mean, so that's an aspect I was going to bring in, and but I think it is because you have that banding, it does make the decisions relatively easy. But we did discuss it in detail to make sure we've met all the items and the criteria properly. And I think I was very reassured with it. And I think Joe and the others were on that panel were as well. We did our best for the trust and for the people concerned in those positions.
Thank you. Whilst we still have Joe here, were there any questions from members of the Council of Governors for colleagues on the Remuneration Committee? Doesn't look like it. If I just ask Joe to drop off, and then we can talk about the wider NED remuneration. So, Sue, do you want me to give a summary, or would you like to?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So for the NED remuneration, that's also following the NHS England framework, and looking at the framework, the remuneration we already pay our NEDs is within that sort of upper part of the framework that's suggested, and there hasn't actually been any change to that over the last couple of years. So in that way, we're therefore, the remuneration committee is therefore making the recommendation that there isn't a change to the remuneration of our non-executive directors. However, we will keep an eye out for any changes in the framework nationally, and then bring that back to the Council of Governors if there are changes and uplifts that we could bring before you. So the recommendations that the NED Remuneration Committee are making is that there is no change to the NED remuneration, but there is a change to the chair remuneration in line with the framework and the growth in the size of the trust.
Thanks, Sally, for doing that. It's I think it's important to reassure everyone that the guidelines are there and they are fairly easy to follow, and that's what we did as a committee.
Therefore, can I ask members of the Council of Governors to show their approval or non-approval of the so if you Cassandra, we want to make a comment, show your approval. If anyone doesn't approve, perhaps you could write it in the chat, and then we can make sure that there's definitely a record of that. Okay, that looks like everybody has been able to comment. Joseph, did you want to comment, or is that your hand up saying you approve? I think that's positive. Okay, from that, I will, Joe will make a minute that the recommendations of the Remuneration Committee are approved, and I will call colleagues back in. Thank you. Welcome back, Andy. Thank you. And then other NED colleagues will be joining as well.
Okay, thanks very much. Right. Let's go on to the next item, which are lead governor report. Sue, please.
I'm sure you've all had the opportunity to read the papers anyway, so I'm not going to go into too much detail because I think what is important is on that paper. What I would like to stress is trying to get governors to be more or get involved in the opportunity to observe the meetings that are going, because there are or have been quite a few meetings that there haven't been any governor observers. Now I know it's very difficult because everyone's busy, but it is worthwhile. It is part of the job as a governor to observe those meetings, because part of our remit is to ensure that the NEDs are acting appropriately and accordingly to for the trust. So I think it's important that governors do take the opportunity. It's very interesting to watch and observe the meeting, and certainly, unlike many other trusts, as governors, we are sometimes for our views and opinions, and we can comment, which I think is really good, and that doesn't happen in a lot of trusts. As you'll see that we were planning a governor's away day, but we've had to move that to a virtual away day, if you like, morning, because of the lack of response. And I was very conscious of that any external venues cost money, so we decided to go with a virtual meeting. And I'll catch up with Joe at some point this week, as I've been away, with what the responses are and how that programme is developing. And we've got quite a good outline of a programme before I went away, and it will be interesting to see that. I think the other boroughs, and you know, it's part and parcel of what we're supposed to do as governors, to be involved. I know it's hard if you're all busy people, but make the opportunity to do it. And I think that sums up my small version and contribution to the meeting. But if anyone's got any questions, I'll do my best.
Any questions for Sue at all? If not, thanks very much, Sue. And yeah, I'm endorsing some of the comments that people have made about, and you've made, Sue, about getting governors along. I know it's quite a chunk out of people's time, but we really do value governor involvement at all levels of the organisation. Well, thanks very much for that. If we move on then to item 8, governor involvement in quality board subcommittees. Suzanne and Yemisi, please.
Hello, Andy. I don't know if Yemisi was able to be at this meeting, so I suspect I may be speaking for both of us. So I think the question of the opportunities for involvement in the subcommittees has in part risen, I think, because since Sophie Proctor has joined the board, she's certainly been pressing us to think very carefully about how we engage with service users and governors and carers. And so I think that's brought it very much to the forefront of our attention, as well as I think obviously other sort of NEDs have raised this as well, but I would like to acknowledge that I think it's one of the things that Sophie has very valuably brought to our board discussions. So we've reported on a couple of the quality committees. So the PQAC, which of course Yemisi chairs, she now asks a question at the end of every meeting. What would patients and staff think about our discussions today? And so far at the meetings that I've attended where that question has been asked, there has been a governor attendee, and they've taken the opportunity to comment on what for them were some of the key points that came out of the meeting. We've taken a slightly different approach with the Continuous Improvement and Innovation Committee, and our approach here really came as a suggestion from the lived experience people involved in the committee. So we've had a service user attendee, Anush Angelova-Velova, for some time, and she has been involved in the committee and represents a service user view. She and Jacqueline Kaur, who leads the Involve work, did though have a discussion about how best to include a more informed view from a wider view, group of people on the committee, and so they've put together what's in effect a shadow continuous improvement committee, and they're going to meet a little bit before that committee meets and feed into our discussions. And that group is forming. They had their first meeting last Friday. The first meeting of the Continuous Improvement Innovation Committee that their views will be represented at is coming up this week. I think we appreciate that there's a little bit of work will need to be done to make sure that that arrangement works. And it has raised in our minds the question about the nature of the papers which go to committees and the extent to which those are of interest and transparent and explicable to those who might attend the committee from our service user and carer community. And the only other thing that I would want to say is just to draw attention to Steve Dilworth's report on what the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee is doing. So from the point of view of governor involvement, there's scope for governors, if they wish to, obviously to come along as observers. For governors who are service users and or carers, there's scope to be involved with the Continuous Improvement and Innovation Committee, and I know that an invitation went out to quite a broad group of people, but if that didn't reach some of the service user and governors, carer governors on the meeting today, I would welcome contact from you. So I think the only other thing that I would add probably is really thinking about how those of you who don't want to come along to every meeting might like to come to occasional meetings. And I think one of the questions that I'd quite like to put to any of you who have been to meetings as observers is what you got out of it, because it'd be quite helpful for us to know, or I'd be interested to know anyway, what governor observers feel that they've got out of coming to meetings that they have come to observe in the past.
Thank you, Suzanne. Sally, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to add that since this paper was written, there have been further discussions with our other board subcommittees about trying to get the sort of user carer voice involved more, particularly sort of people committee and say the infrastructure committee as well, and kind of using this shadow form to be able to share papers and get feedback that can then feed into the committees. I guess for the Council of Governors, we really want to make sure that you're able to take advantage of these opportunities. I guess the Council of Governors really have two hats. One is you were invited to observe to see the non-exec directors in action in chairing the committee, so that when you're involved in appraisals, etc., you've actually seen people in action, and that was our original setup for the observing. But also, very much we want to get the user carer voice into our committees more, and obviously many of our Council of Governor members do have those experiences, so it's making sure that you can be active in that role as well. So it's kind of in addition to your existing kind of observer role. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Was that Rebecca? Did you have your hand up?
Thank you. Yes, I did. I would like to advocate how useful it is to attend the meetings. It really informs what we do within Oxley, so we can see the sort of a few more nuts and bolts of what processes and problems go on in the background and how they're resolved. But also, as Sally's just said, to be able to see how our non-executive directors work, and it's really informed me in terms of being able to put forward views and fill out questionnaires about how people work, because you're actually watching them work, and they will ask you, you know, if there's any input you want. We're very lucky within Oxley's, and I would recommend all the governors to get on board and attend the meetings.
Thank you, Rebecca. Les, please.
Yes, I completely endorse what Rebecca just said. I attend quite a few of the committees, and I do find them really useful and interesting in seeing all the work that goes on behind the scenes, just in terms of trying to improve things and how problems are dealt with, and also how the NEDs are really, you know, looking into what's happening and asking some really good questions and doing their job really. So I'd certainly also recommend governors try to attend them if they get the chance.
Thank you, Les. Yeah, I completely agree with everyone said. It's a vital role, and it's an integral part of our constitution as a foundation trust, that the governors hold the NEDs to account, who hold the exec to account. But it's more than that. It's not just a simple linear arrangement. I do see it as we're in this together, and we've got such a wide and rich range of governors, from staff governors to public to service users, that it's a really important part of what we do. Suzanne, please.
Don't let John go first, and I'll come back.
Okay, John, please.
Thanks, Suzanne. I'm just reflecting really, was it less of an issue when we met face to face? because in a way, this sort of sheet used to come around, and I'm here thinking about, it's sort of slightly gone off the agenda a bit. And I was just thinking about whether we could use the annual members meeting to perhaps push it again, have it more visible, because just having those dates available and you could tick a box, it sort of made it visible there and then, and sort of people signed up to it, really. That's what my thoughts were. But I agree with all the comments about the value of attending those meetings.
I think you're right, John. I think the very fact of being together, raises these issues, and which is another matter about whether or not we revisit face-to-face or continue with virtual, because I really do miss meeting people. It's all those side discussions, isn't it, that we have, and just meeting people rather than doing this all day long. But no, good point. Shall I go to Rebecca, Suzanne, and then come back to you? Thank you. Rebecca, please. Mute Rebecca, I think.
You're mute, Rebecca.
Thank you. I just wanted to share a little strategy that I have in terms of when the meetings come through. Knowing that we're elected to do this role, I try and put one in a month, every month. So that's only 12 meetings a year. Some of them are only 2 hours. Some of them are a little bit longer. But I do try and put them in. And so far, I think I very rarely drop a meeting. I'm mostly in most of them, and they go in the diary, and then they're sort of concrete unless I have a patient need that becomes more immediate or urgent. But I try and ring fence that time. So, and thinking about how many we've got over 30 governors. So if we all did one a month, I mean, all our meetings would be full up.
Yeah, good point, Rebecca. Thank you. Back to you, Suzanne.
Well, I think there's already been a couple of suggestions along the lines of what I was going to ask, which was what might make it easier and more attractive for people to come to the meetings. I mean, one of the things that I have been wondering about, and this goes to the face-to-face issue that John raised, is I think after a committee has met for a long time on Teams, I think we need to get together and see each other as real people and have a cup of tea and engage. And so I am thinking of trying to do that with the forthcoming meeting of the Continuous Improvement Innovation Committee. And I think that would be a nice opportunity in particular to encourage governors to come along and join us. If there are any governors here today who are enthused and inspired after this discussion, there is a CIIC meeting coming up this week, which is still available for a governor attendee, and you'd be most welcome.
Thank you, Suzanne. Rebecca, was that you coming back? All right, okay. Well, that's really good. Thank you for raising that. I think it's obviously something that we really do want to get right. Cassandra, please. Did I see, was that Cassandra?
It was. Sorry, I just dropped out as my internet failed. I just was going to, I suppose, reflect. Rebecca's comments were absolutely right. And then it would be useful just to have that. Maybe we need to, I can't remember how often the list is circulated. And maybe we just need it circulated more often to remind us. I'm just a query, but I think Rebecca's approach is really sensible.
Good point, Cassandra. Thank you. I think it's a really good discussion and a very important one too. I'm personally very passionate about the governor's involvement. It really does add value and it holds us to account. And it is, as I say, an integral part of our structure as a foundation trust. And so welcome that. Just thinking about the face-to-face, I'm not going to open the discussion up now, but I do really want to think about this. And Sally, I mean, can we have a discussion about having another poll of colleagues, please? Because I think it might be time that we got back together. But I'll listen to everybody else's views. But personally, I would welcome the opportunity to do that. So perhaps we can take an action to speak to colleagues about that for the future. Okay, thanks very much indeed on that. We'll move on now to the Eltham Hospital development proposals. And who's going to present?
So that's myself and Rachel. So my name's Russell Cartwright. I'm Assistant Director of Communications and Engagement for the South East London ICS, and it's good to see a few familiar faces here. I was previously at Oxley's. I spent over 12 years working for Oxley's, so it's nice to be back, even virtually, I guess. But can I just check how long we have for this slot? And Rachel and I will try and tailor it to try and stick to it. But, how long do you want us to be?
I would have thought about 10 minutes would be fine. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Just bear with me 1 second while I do that. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. Could somebody just, I can't actually see any faces, so could somebody just say that whether you can see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, yeah, cool. Okay, so I've been working with Rachel Matheson, who's going to come in midway through this presentation since the summer to engage with residents around proposals for Eltham Community Hospital. We for quite a while now, we started our public engagement on the 16th of August to align with the staff consultation, the staff who were affected by the proposals. We've done a number of kind of face-to-face sessions. We've done electronic engagement. We've done surveys, adverts, forum discussions. Quite a bit of work on this. And we are just putting together this phase of the engagement. I'm writing up a report as we speak, which will go to the Healthier Greenwich Partnership with a view to them approving the proposals with some recommendations that we're making following what we've heard as part of the engagement. So just to give you sorry, my slide's not moving on, that's not helpful. Here we go. Yeah. So just to give you a background on what's happening. So Eltham Hospital opened in 2015. I think it's been quite widely acknowledged that not through lack of effort, we haven't been able to get the most out of Eltham Hospital since it opened. So currently on the site, there are 2 GP practices, musculoskeletal services, phlebotomy, X-ray services, some intermediate care beds, and also a number of outpatient clinics. The first part of the proposals that I want to talk about is a community diagnostic centre. So NHS England have agreed to fund community diagnostic centres across the country, and Eltham has been identified as an ideal space for this. And we're really excited about this because it would bring in quite a lot of funding, which is on another slide, but also it would really help with helping to clear some of the backlog around diagnostics that has built up during the pandemic and during COVID. It will enable people to have access to really important checks closer to home, quicker diagnosis, and we think, although this slide says Greenwich, these slides we've been talking mainly to people in Greenwich, but actually the proposed community diagnostic centre would be open to residents of neighbouring boroughs as well. So we think it would be a massive benefit to local communities. So it would. If we were to put the community diagnostic centre into Eltham, we believe it could allow for an extra 64,000 plus scans per year, another 27,000 blood tests per year, as well as extra capacity for ultrasound, blood tests, X-rays. We would have a new CT scanner there, an MRI scanner, an extra capacity for respiratory and cardiac diagnoses. I mentioned money coming in, so NHS England would invest 13 million on the kind of capital costs, so the redevelopment costs for Eltham, plus all of the equipment that we would need, plus we've got a commitment for the ongoing funding for the next 3 years. As I mentioned, this would really increase diagnostic capacity. This is all extra diagnosis stuff. So what's happening at Queen Elizabeth Hospital and what's happening at other hospitals will still continue. This is extra capacity. it would really improve the waiting times. It would reduce the numbers of people needing to go to the hospital sites, which we think would also help reduce some of the pressure at the local acute sites, so particularly Queen Elizabeth and University Hospital Lewisham. And also we feel that it will help reduce health inequalities. Greenwich residents are underserved in terms of diagnoses, particularly I think MRI scans and CT scans. There's an inequality there. And we know that parts of our population are have different levels of diagnoses for serious illnesses. So we're really confident that this is a really good thing for local people. I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who's going to talk a little bit about Home First and what that is and how that's affected things. Rachel, if you want to introduce yourself, then let me know when you want to move the slides on.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Matheson. I'm the Associate Director for Adult Community Physical Health Services, specifically the Associate Director for the Greenwich Services, which is why I'm talking to you about these proposals. Primarily, they're based in Greenwich. So first of all, this slide is around the Home First initiative. It's really to introduce you to a programme that we've been involved with for the last 3 years. We've had 2 years worth of investment now in some of our services within the community in our directorate. We've had funding for a frailty team, a falls team, and additional funding for some of our therapy services too, and an expansion of our rapid response teams. For Greenwich, that is our joint emergency team, which is called JET. So the Home First initiative it's running across Greenwich and Bexley, but these are the 4 aims. So we have, I'm not going to read through them, there's 4 aims there. It's a really significant programme. We're really trying to keep people at home for rehab and to experience all the benefits of being treated at home. And the final aim on here really is about people being able to die in their preferred place of death. So we're really trying to look at all parts of the pathway. In the box, you'll see there's been £1.9 million of investment across the teams, and that includes our rapid response teams. As I said, for us, that's in JET. We've got GP sessions now within that JET team. We're working with 111 to accept referrals within a 2-hour response framework for that team. We have more therapy, as I said, and we're looking at our dementia and delirium pathway. So Russell, if you move on to the next one. This slide shows how much more community activity we've been working with. So this specifically is around packages of care. So you can see that since we've been working on our Home First initiative, we have been managing to discharge a lot more people to the community. This is a programme that's working across all sectors. We're working on this jointly with the local authority and the hospice and other partners across South East London. So you can see the increase in activity. If you move on to the next one, Russell. So these are some of the teams, as I said, that are part of our Home First approach, and we have got some very positive patient experience feedback from our friends and family test data. I'm just going to go on this one. I know we don't have very long, so I'm going to go to the next one, Russell. Thank you. Lots of information for you. I know you've seen this in your pack, but the virtual wards is an additional programme that we're just embarking upon now. We've just heard in the last week that we will be receiving the funding for this. I think we'll actually receive 1.4 million for Greenwich. And again, this is a further expansion of our services in the community. So our frailty team will expand from covering 1 GP PCN to all 6 within Greenwich, which is massive. We're really excited about that. There's an expansion across all of the other teams that are illustrated here as well, including some funding for children's IV antibiotics, which I know is something that we've been really keen on in terms of our Great Out of Hospital Care programme. More reablement, physio and OT. So we're really excited about the virtual ward work. It again means that we're treating a lot more people at home. So we're building the picture here to explain more about our intermediate care changes. So over the last well, 3 years, we've looked at data for over 3 years, we have seen that there's been less use of our intermediate care units. But what is intermediate care? We have bedded units within Bexley and Greenwich, and we have one at Eltham Community Hospital. It's where you would experience a period of rehab in a bedded unit with therapists, nurses supporting you so that you can then go home to be more independent. So currently we have got space. I'm based at Eltham today, so I can say I'm here. We've got 2 wards with 20 beds in each side. One of them is currently empty. We're not using it. We haven't required to in terms of the number of referrals for some time. And the data here, around 96% of our patients are discharged home currently from hospital, which shows that more people are able to be discharged home and have received their care there. Oxley's run both intermediate care units, the one here at East Eltham and the one in Meadowview, which is at Queen Mary's Hospital. Meadowview also is rarely full. There are 30 beds commissioned there, and currently I think they have 12 beds available today. So our proposal is that we would consolidate both units for Bexley and Greenwich patients, so the patients would receive intermediate care treatment at the Meadowview site, Queen Mary's Hospital. So we've done a full analysis of the data to get us to this point. Here are the benefits of the proposal. There's some of the benefits that we see. We see it providing a more resilient service for our patients because we have a bigger staff group there, better rehab. People will be able to go home more quickly. Some of what we're doing is adding in medical provision at the weekends and patient flow, facility and admin at the weekends. There are other benefits for the site at Queen Mary's. It has a urgent care centre on site. It has other wards on site. It has a cafe for patients and families to go to, a shop in the foyer on some days of the week. Eltham Community Hospital is much more isolated, and we don't have any kind of support out of hours from medical staff. We're the only service that's open at the weekend in this building, apart from a few outpatient clinics downstairs. So we believe that it would be a better experience for patients and relatives having that facilities, and also, as I've said, the Home First models has meant that we've been able to provide support for people at home. There's a picture of Meadowview there as well. We know that by doing this and putting the teams together, we will have a much greater skill mix with staff. As Russell said, our consultation with staff has been going until the 16th of September. So we've had that consultation for a month. And we know that there will be there's no proposed changes in terms of staff banding or people losing their jobs. We want everybody to come into that new team together so that we can provide a really high quality service. Our patient flow process will be simplified, which will be better for one service and one applying the criteria in the same way. And obviously we've talked about the diagnostic centre. There's a picture there of the Meadowview Gymnasium as well. I believe that's the last slide, Russell. Yeah, great. So just to confirm as well that the Community Diagnostic Centre that Russell talked about would be run by Lewisham and Greenwich Trust. This isn't an Oxley's service. It would be provided by the Acute Trust, but within this building. So we brought the proposal to you to make sure there weren't any questions or any feedback that we need to consider. Sally.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Just wanted to note that Rebecca, obviously one of our governors, is quite linked into the services. I don't know, Rebecca, if you just wanted to, because you'll have sort of interest in the services as a member of staff.
Yes, thank you, Sally. And I'm one of the staff members that have been, everyone here has been part of the consultation, and it's been very clear. We've been very supported, and it's a big change to the use of the unit, but we have to be aware of the resources available to the NHS and make the best use of the resources that we have within Oxley's, but also within the wider healthcare facilities for not just for Greenwich patients, but for those around as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. John, please.
Thanks, Andy. I mean, it all sounds really exciting, isn't it? But my question really is around, does actually Oxley's own the Eltham Community Hospital?
No, that's a good question, John. It's not. It's owned. It's a public-private partnership. So when we're trying to make, this is one of the reasons why it's quite challenging being in this building sometimes. When we're trying to make changes here, so for example, we wanted to put some oxygen cylinders on the wall. It takes some time to get that to happen because we don't manage it directly in terms of the estates. So some of the funding for the building will go back into the system in terms of investment in more community services, in terms of the lease.
Okay, thanks, Sir Rachel. And just another point really is it the home serve teams? I mean, it sounds quite complex. I saw there was 5 teams, and in my head was thinking, what issues are likely to arise if there's 5 separate teams being developed, and wondering whether there's any way of consolidating, I guess, because I can see the referrals going A to B to C and up and down. Really.
No, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. So as part of the consultation, we haven't presented about it here because we felt it might make it too complicated, but we in the Greenwich services don't have a single point of contact for our services. So some of the proposal is that some of the staff from our service here at Eltham will go to set up that single point of contact. So we want to have a much more streamlined way into our community services. So that we're creating a management post and some more admin within that team so that we can have a proper referral process into all of these services under Home First and the virtual ward for Greenwich. So yeah, you're thinking ahead, John.
I think that's a really good question, John. I sometimes wonder when I see these very specific teams with some micro differences between them, but I'm not the expert. But anyway, it's good to hear that that's being looked at. Sue, please.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions. Glad to see the opportunity. Just slightly worried it's Greenwich is mentioned in nearly every slide and Bexley's only mentioned once or twice. So that's my concern as lead governor for Oxley.
Yeah, just to come back on that point, they're not covered in this slide, but that's because we're talking about Eltham Hospital. But so community diagnostic centres, NHS England have agreed to fund 3 in South East London, which is Bexley, Bromley, Greenwich, Lambeth, Southwark, Lewisham, and there is a proposal being worked on. It's just not as advanced as the Eltham one, to put one at Queen Mary's as well. So yeah. potentially Bexley will be getting one as well.
Yeah, because that's my next question, because I know we'd had discussions about that in the past. One of the questions, I understand all the fast track, and that's quite good. What I'm concerned about, in some extent, is the impact on the district nursing service, because they are really struggling at the moment. How will that be supported and helped with this new streamlining or working together? And then in terms of the fact that obviously the wider NHS and changes happen across the NHS, and I'm quite understand that, and if we stand still, we'll just fall down. So it is changes and moving forward. But I suppose it's good to see Bexley Queen Mary's is still on the agenda somewhere, because I think that was something we were quite excited about, I think, in Oxley. I just worry for the Bexley residents to some extent, wider Bexley, because it's not all south of the borough. We've got the other end at the south of the borough, north of the borough. Getting to Eltham is not always easy. A lot of us know what the transport links are like, and there's not a lot of parking at Eltham either. I mean, say Queen Mary's is bad enough, but Eltham Cottage is different. So there's more comments and suggestions. I'm pleased to see there's something happening. Just some concerns. So thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Can I just just on that DN impact, our district nurses, you're right, they are very pressured at the moment. I also manage our Greenwich District Nurse Services. I mean, all of the investment that we're seeing, we also have investment in district nursing as well. It's certainly been recognised that it's a very stretched service, and we would also hope that the investment for the virtual wards, where we're having money invested in the frailty team, that there's a preventative element to people becoming more frail. That's the purpose of that team. It reduces hospital admissions and reliance on other services. And our JET team has had some increase in resource, including nursing as well. So I think in combination, we're looking at all services supporting, but yeah, we're very much aware of the district nurse pressures and recruiting at the moment to those teams.
Thank you.
Cassandra, please.
Hi, Rachel. Just a quick question, or just again an observation. It's interesting to hear that if this is a sort of, in inverted commas, if you like, a step down potentially from a more acute hospital, what we keep being told in the news, and I get figures on it from NHS England around, number of people waiting for discharge who are fit for discharge or could be moved on, but are stuck because of kind of social care packages or whatever. I suppose I'm just commenting that I'm amazed it's not being used more, but maybe it's not suitable. And I'm sure you guys have thought of all of this. It just seems a sort of bizarre kind of situation to be in compared to what we're being told all the time by the number of people stuck waiting for discharge.
Absolutely, thanks. Hi Cassie, nice to see you again. It's been a while. Yeah, I completely agree, and I accept that point completely. I think what we are aware of in our intermediate care unit here, ECB, is that we have flexed our beds in the past. We have accepted social care admissions. We were the positive COVID positive pathway at one point in wave 2 of the pandemic, and actually we're not being the rehab unit that we're commissioned to be. So the idea is that we're a rehab team and we're providing intermediate care. I think once we start to flex our criteria, we are taking referrals that should be managed in a different way within the system. So if, for example, if people need to wait for a package of care to be sorted at home, they can go to a place called Langton Way in Greenwich, or if people are waiting for a care home placement. So they're the type of patients that sometimes come here under that flex category, and you're right, they're the people that are generally waiting in the hospital. There is at the moment a bid within Greenwich for additional D2A beds, 6 additional beds, and another 10 coming online. So it is something that is being, I'm supporting our system partners with that. So yes, there is a need for that in the borough, and it's getting organised at this moment as we speak.
Great, thank you, Rachel.
John, please.
Thanks, Andy. I think Sue's point about transport really is such an important one, isn't it? And the potential number of people coming to Eltham Community Hospital, and again, I hope we're working with the local transport and with the local authorities on looking at the potential implications of that number of people arriving or potentially using those services, really.
Yeah, I don't know the detail of that, but I am aware that my commissioning colleagues have had conversations with Transport for London and the local authority around that. Yeah, it's definitely something being considered.
Yeah.
I think Keithy, please.
Thanks, Chair. John, I was just going to reassure you that when the community diagnostics opportunities were first discussed, the acute provider collaborative that's handling this on behalf of South East London ICS looked at lots and lots of potential sites and did, I'm not sure, I think they're called travel plans, looking at how people will travel, etc. And the 3 sites that they chose for community diagnostics was based entirely on that, and as has been said, there was one on the Queen Mary site as well. But there is a further conversation, as has been said, to be had with local bus companies, etc. So how we can. We had the same issue many years ago when we talked about areas. How do we make sure that we can increase the opportunity for people to travel by public transport? But one of the really positive things that people have always commented on is the fact that on the Queen Mary side, there is parking, which makes it easier.
Thanks, Iffy. If there's nothing else on that, thank you so much, Rachel and Russell, for that presentation. There's been a huge amount of work gone into this. I'm personally really pleased that there's going to be a vibrant public service in such an amazingly good location, just off the High Street in Elton. And my fear was we'd lose this place, but it's such a prime place to be. And I know the local community really do put a lot of value in having a service of a variety of services that we have in such a place. And of course, there will be developments at Queen Mary's of all sorts in due course, no doubt on that. But thank you so much for the presentation. I'm very grateful for that. If we can move on now to item 10, the external auditors update. Azra, please.
So if I just introduce this before I bring Raymond to go through some of the content. This is a copy of the full range of external audit work that was covered by Grant Thornton during the course of basically on the 2021-22 accounts. So it includes both the certificate on the annual accounts and their value for money work. I was going to hand this over then to Raymond to present. And I'm going to probably say, Raymond, if you take the overarching document as read by the governors, and then we can leave a little bit more time for questions. I hope Raymond is on the call.
Yeah, I am. I don't know if everybody can see me, but yeah, thanks, Azra. As Azra mentioned, we'll take the report as read. So for those who meet me for the first time, I'm Raymond. I'm a manager within our PSA audit in Grant Thornton. And as Azra mentioned previously, Joe Brown, our audit partner, is unfortunately unable to attend this meeting. Joe is based in Scotland and today is Glasgow holiday. And so I'm here to run you through the external audit update and will try my best to answer any questions. So the slides, if you can go to the next slide, please. That summarizes the overall result of our audit for the year ended 31st March 2022. The auditor's annual report issued on 30th August concluded the 21-22 audit process. The financial statement was unmodified. All the financial statement opinion was unmodified, and that was signed and submitted within the statutory NHS deadline on 22nd June. Overall, there is a good audit process where the audit team and finance worked well together. There is a good set of financial statements and working papers, and both finance and audit team have reflected on what went well and what we can improve going forward into the 22-23 audit process. And alongside financial statements, we need to comply with the NAO code. So the code requires us to consider whether the body has put in place proper arrangements to secure the 3 E's: economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in its use of resources. And that includes providing commentary on those arrangements under 3 specified reporting criteria, such as financial sustainability, governance, and the 3 E's, or improving economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. And based on the result of our work, we did not identify any significant weaknesses. So the report itself is detailed and covers many aspects of Oxley's arrangements. And we did identify 7 improvement recommendations. And our take is it is common for us to have those improvement recommendations as we support the trust in identifying and delivering good practices and can share our experience from our other bodies. Management have agreed to our recommendations as noted in the detailed AAR, or annual auditor's annual report, and we will follow this up in the next year's audit 22-23. Also, the report concludes on management's actions from the prior audit. As you can note on our report, overall there is a good progress as over the 5 improvement points that we raised previously. So they've been addressed in the 21-22 year. So certain aspects of the report also included a forward look into the new ICS, which we will continue to consider. And I'll pause there to pick up any questions from anyone.
Thank you, Raymond. Any questions at all on that? I thought that was really helpful. It was a very good report, and I thought some excellent recommendations, which, as you say, we've completely agreed with. If there are no questions for Raymond, we'll thank you very much, and we'll move on to item 11. Ezra, please.
Just to say, Raymond should probably step out of the meeting at this point.
I'm sure Raymond will.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Raymond.
So this is an update, and due to the timing of the fact that this meeting had to be shifted, we actually took a version of this paper to the Audit Committee before it's come to Council of Governors. I'm going to take the paper as read. It's broadly similar to a paper that was presented a little bit earlier this financial year when we first indicated that we would need to go out and use a process to find a set of external auditors for the year 23-24 onwards, because our current audit contract finishes with basically the delivery of the 22-23 audited statements. We've been looking at what the overarching external audit market has been looking like, and it is very, very tight. There are a number of external auditors, certainly some of the ones for the bigger companies, that have completely come out of this market, principally due to the fact that there has been much more oversight and legislation on external auditors and the way they perform their work. And therefore, those audits and the work that they need to do in order to give an audit opinion has increased over the course of the last couple of years. Secondly, there has been, as part and parcel of some of the incidents and scandals that have come out, where people have been given a clean audit opinion and then have gone bankrupt, they have said that part of that is linked to the fact that you've got external auditors that also then provide consultancy services to organisations, and therefore they have conflicts of interest. For the Governing Council for those areas has determined they cannot do that anymore. And that has resulted in a number of organisations pulling out of the NHS external audit market. Since this paper was written, we've had the feedback from the SLAM external audit tender process. They only had one company come back and bid for the work, and that company was Grant Thornton, who was their current incumbent. So that's the reason that the recommendation in the paper would be that we go for a negotiated settlement with Grant Thornton. I've separately spoken to them, and they have said that they would be interested in providing us audit services. The issue that I've not managed to get over the line is what the increase in cost SLAM had. They already had a higher cost than we did. It was about 106,000, I think, was their overarching external audit fees. And so we would need to start that negotiation with Grant Thornton, and we'll need to start it fairly soon. I understand that there was a governor that was particularly interested in getting involved when we were going for the full tender exercise. Apologies, I wasn't able to reach out to you before the meeting. But if we would still want governor oversight in that negotiated discussion that we have with Grant Thornton, more than happy to include a governor within that process. That's all I was going to say. I'm happy to take any questions, Andy.
Thank you, Ezra. So it looks like the market's getting quite constricted then, as far as
it is. I mean, they're just not bidding. That's the key aspect, because I think they want to concentrate on the more lucrative consultancy side. Grant Thornton are one of the few that are still really maintaining and indeed growing their NHS external audit arm.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions for Ezra at all on this? If not, thank you very much indeed for all the work that's gone into that. I'm instructed by the agenda here to grant a break. Should we go for a 5 past? Can we cut back to make it a 10-minute break? So if we can return at 5 past, is that okay, everybody? Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. a start. And we'll go straight on to our next item, item 12, the comprehensive inquiry into Mr. A. Thank you.
I'm going to be presenting that. I don't think Yemisi is on the call. So good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Abi Fadik. I'm the medical director for Oxley's, and I'm just going to present the case of a 23-year-old gentleman who was known to Oxley's, and the incident occurred in January 2021. We did put together a serious incident review, which was chaired by Matthew Traynor, who was the chief executive at the time, and Yemisi Gibbons was also part of that panel, as was Steve Turner, who's the governor. It was a level 5 serious incident investigation. So just to give you a bit of background into Mr. A, he had a traumatic childhood, had no contact with his father, and had experienced physical abuse from his stepfather and sexual abuse as a child. He'd also experienced bullying in school due to him having a hearing impairment and the diagnosis of autism, which he got at the age of 12. He did attend a special school and spent time in foster care. In 2016, he was charged with offences relating to sexual assault of a young child under 13, and he received a custodial sentence for that and was placed on the sex offenders register, and he did spend 3 years in prison. He had been treated at different points in time for, low mood, anxiety, and he had expressed some suicidal thoughts. And when he was younger, he had been under the care of our CAMS team, but was not open to any adult mental health team. Next slide, please, Joe. So this is a summary of the incident. Mr. A was arrested on the 19th of January, suspected of murdering his grandfather. He had recently moved in with his grandparents, and at the time he was on remand at Lewisham Police Station. He had been assessed by the Greenwich Mental Health Liaison Team 5 days prior on the 14th of January and was referred to the Bexley Home Treatment Team. However, because he wanted to stay with his grandparents and they lived in Greenwich, his care was transferred to the Greenwich Home Treatment Team on the 16th of January. At the time, he'd also been referred to a few of our other teams, but because he was now within the acute care pathway, those referrals were disregarded. Next slide, please. So the findings from the investigation showed that Mr. A, the greatest risk from Mr. A appeared to be around his self-harm, and the risk assessments concentrated mainly on that. An admission was initially considered for him, but because of his difficulties and the fact that this was during the second wave of COVID, it was felt that it would be in his best interest to be managed at home with his grandparents with the support of the home treatment team. There was no indication of his previous history of physical violence to others. His grandmother and mother were very shocked at the incident and said it was entirely out of character. There was no indication that any contacts between Mr. A and Oxley's clinicians that he might be or he might carry out a violent attack towards anyone. And there was nothing in his history which would suggest that. There was nothing from his history that suggested that he had a strained relationship with his grandfather or that there was any source of concern. That was all found out during the investigation. And the transfer of care between the Bexley and Greenwich Home Treatment Team was very well managed and appropriate. Next slide, please. So the panel did not identify any root cause or any contributory factors to this very sad incident. However, there were some learning points which they wanted to address. So there was not a full assessment of those living at the address that Mr. A was going to. However, this was not in any of Oxley's policies. Neither is it clear whether this would have made any difference to the outcome. Mr. A had identified his grandmother as his primary source of support, and it's well documented in his records that with his consent, she was always included in his care planning and treatment for him, and she was very aware of his current risk, and she knew of his historical risks as well. The support network and engagement tool was completed, and his grandmother was identified as the most important person to him, and her mobile phone was the one that was recorded. So in terms of working with families and his main source of support, it was his grandmother. Next slide, please. So another thing which the investigation found was the risk assessment form was not completed in full, although all his risks, historical and current, had been well documented in the progress notes. It had been noticed that he was reluctant to discuss his experience of sexual abuse as a child, and it wasn't felt that even if he was open to discussing this, whether he would have told the clinicians about any ill feelings he had towards his grandfather. But there was no indication, and that wasn't a line of questioning which the clinicians took with him. Next slide, please. There were some areas of good practice. The doctor who we saw at the Bexley home treatment team, the family said she displayed compassion, and she was very considered in her approach, in her assessment. She was very holistic and considered all his needs, and really took into account the diagnosis of autism when she was trying to formulate a management plan for him. And she took time to listen to his grandmother and his family, which was very pleasing to read, considering that some of our previous serious incidents, families do complain about not feeling included in the care planning process and nobody talking to them. This wasn't the case in this incident. She also displayed evidence of seeking to learn from the case because she was involved in the investigation, and she has spent time reflecting on her engagement and whether there was anything that she could have done differently. And the panel noticed this and welcomed her insight and candor. They felt that while admission had been indicated for Mr. A, given his risk to himself, consideration was given to his needs and the experience that he may go through being on an inpatient unit during a pandemic, and that probably would have made him worse. So with this in mind, and because of the relationship he had with his grandmother, it was felt that it was better for him to be managed at home, which is what happened, and that was considered to be in his best interest. So those were the areas of good practice which were recognized, and that's my last slide. I'm happy to take any questions, and I'll try to answer as best as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. It's sad event, isn't it? Any questions for Abby on that, please? If not, then thank you very much indeed for that very comprehensive report. I'm very grateful. Thank you. And then we'll move on to the next item, which is the strategy update, 1 year implementation overview. Sally, you're taking this one, I think.
Yes, and unfortunately, Rachel Evans, who would normally present to you on the strategy, because of the move of the Council of Governors meeting, couldn't make it today, so I'm presenting it on her behalf. So you may remember that in March last year, the Council of Governors agreed the trust strategy, and having been involved in the Our Next Step work, where we went out to people that use our services, people that work for Oxleas, local communities, and talk to people about what they wanted as the priorities. And from that consultation, we developed 3 main goals for the Trust, which are achieving 0 delays, delivering great out-of-hospital care, and making Oxleas a great place to work. And they're supported by a number of building blocks. And this report is an update 1 year on about how we've been taking that forward. Obviously, there's quite a wealth of work that's been going and programs of work to take these forward. Many of you will have come to the Great Out of Hospital Care Conference that was held earlier this year and would have seen the wide variety of different types of work that are going on to build on having hospital outside of build on having care outside of hospitals and closer to people's homes. And in fact, a presentation that we had earlier in this meeting about Eltham Hospital and how the support to people in their own homes has led to fewer people needing to be cared for in hospital is a great example of that. And for the 0 delays work stream, there's been a lot of work that's looked at getting to an understanding of waiting times and an agreed level of wait, and then where the restrictions and where the delays are within the system and what can be done to overcome those. And the Making Oxleas a Great Place to Work priority has been taken forward in a number of different work streams, all both about retaining the staff that we've got around wellbeing and career progression. And as if you mentioned, the session we had this morning about encouraging graduates in and talking to them about the opportunities within the organisation is another aspect about, as well as retaining the staff that we've got, recruiting new staff and wanting people to come and work and see that Oxleas is a great place to work and a place to spend their career. And obviously, if we've got enthusiastic, well-trained staff in place, then they are then able to deliver really good care for our patients. In the information that's in your pack, it also goes through the 8 building blocks, which are really programs across the organisation that if we get right, they will help us deliver these priorities and programs around using IT and information well, improving the safety and learning within the organisation, involving people that use our services and carers more so that the services improve in the way that patients want, a focus on quality management and reusing our resources as well as possible, whether that's financial resources, but also sustainability in the environmental sense as well. A key focus has also been on equity and looking at how we can work both as an organisation, but also as part of the wider system in the integrated care system to move that our services meet the needs of the local population, and particularly that work stream and the environmental building block is something that we're doing very much on a system level as well as individually within the organisation. So we report in every board meeting an update on the different individual work streams, but what we wanted to do with this was really just to give people an update across the piece and show the developments that have taken place. And obviously we're 1 year into a multi-year strategy, so we wanted to bring that for the Council of Governors for you to see and ask any questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Any questions on Yvonne, did you want to ask?
Yeah, I really wanted to ask about how much tangible progress we've made on 0 delays. because we're all still painfully aware of some of the wait times for services. And one that I get a lot of feedback from residents is particularly the CAMS side of things, children having to wait a long time. So I really just wondered, have we got some tangible measurements of real dents we have made into delays to evidence that the medicine's working effectively?
Sure. No, that's a very apt question. I mean, part of the programme is making sure that the data and the measurements that we've got are accurate so that we have got good baselines to actually work from and make sure that any changes we can really measure. Particularly around CAMS, I know the governors have raised questions about this before, and actually what the data showed is that, yes, we have been able to take out time of people waiting, and we've been able to shorten and by running certain processes together rather than waiting from one than the other. However, this is against a backdrop of increased demand on the services, and therefore, whilst we have made improvements, the overall picture is not necessarily hugely better because of the increase on the services. So we're better than we would have been without it, but it's not the panacea for all, unfortunately. I'm not sure if more clinical colleagues would like to add to that. Ify.
Absolutely, Sally. I think you're absolutely right about that. But I also need to say that there are 2 or 3 other aspects of this work that I'd like to draw out. One of them is making sure that we've got the right systems to identify who is waiting and how long they're waiting for, and that this is visible to clinicians, because part of what we found is that we have standalone systems that only the admin team had access to, and so a clinician may not have a sense how long people are waiting for. The second thing is that as part of this process, it's been really good to have clinicians look at the pathways to make sure that there aren't unnecessary blocks in the pathways, or handoffs or people having secondary or tertiary waits within the service, and make sure that it's really streamlined. And then the other thing to say is that even in children's services, that we have introduced ways of doing assessments that are not necessarily about face-to-face, but yet give the same high quality assessments to families. But as Sally has said, part of the issue is that the demand has just been so high, and we've been struggling in some areas to recruit staff to enable us manage previous demand, let alone the increased demand that we have. And I will say that this is something that the exec have thought about, we've discussed. NEDS have really challenged us on this, and we think it's the right thing to do. And there's no question in my mind that as time goes on, we'll constantly will be drawn back, as you have done today, to ask the question, what exactly have we achieved? But I'm absolutely confident it is the right strategic goal, and quite a lot has been done, but we just find ourselves in this really difficult situation where it's proving more difficult to crack it on account of the shifting parameters, i.e. demand and staffing in particular.
With Limbo, please. No. Okay, Abby then, please.
Thanks very much, Andy. I just wanted to add to what Ify said, that all 3 strategic priorities are going to have to work together. Because of the increased demand that we've had, we're going to have to look at all our services and how we offer people different interventions at different points. And one of the major things that we need to do that is our workforce. So we will need to create a space where people enjoy working and want to come and work, because everybody across the NHS is fishing from the same staffing pool. So everything is going to work together in order to be able to make a dent, provide in our waiting times, provide other alternatives or interventions, which means that people can access other things which may support them, rather than waiting on a list for one of our interventions. So they're all going to knit together in order to be able to sort of bring the waiting list down, but also provide alternatives or other options for not just our children, but for all the people that use our services.
Thank you, Abby. Ravimbo, please.
Thank you, Andy. I think I was unclear whether this is related to my question that I did submit, and whether that could have more response here, or if that would be addressed later at the end.
Yes, thank you. You have put a question in, and it is at the bottom of our agenda. And I'm presuming, Abby or Iffy, that one of you is going to answer that in due course.
That's fine. It just seems slightly relevant. It just seems slightly relevant to this, but I will then reserve my comment for later then in relation to this.
Yeah, I mean, we could, let's just, I'll come to John, and then I'll come back to Iffy when you want to answer that. John,
Absolutely.
please.
Thanks, Andy. At one of the sort of updates, I think, by the Greenwich directors, there was a brief discussion point, but is it new national guidance or strategies for a time frame about referrals coming in from next April? And I was just wondering whether that's going to be significant or what it's going to impact on that strategic plan.
Thanks, John. Yeah, that is being part of the planning. So part of the work that's being done is helping us to get the systems in place so that can be measured and reported on effectively. Yeah.
I think this is an interesting discussion. I think I'd like to talk more about perhaps an update at our next Council of Governors, because picking up Yvonne's point, and I do appreciate there's been a lot else going on, of course there has, but we did set out some very, very challenging targets. The strategy was, researched very well and agreed. And I suppose one of the things, if one was looking at it from the outside, one might say the next steps are interesting. What we've done so far has been sort of preparatory work. And it might be a legitimate question to say, well, how quickly can we crack on with this and to get some hard outcomes? Because time does march on. And when we're talking about withheld focus groups and high-level assessments and technical solutions, one could say, and what exactly has got better? If it hasn't got better because our demand has gone up, then I think we need to see that. I think we need to explore that. We are the body that oversees the strategy of the trust, and I think the governors should be involved in overseeing this. And I think I would certainly welcome a longer discussion with some more detail the next time we gather, just to see what that progress has been. Notwithstanding the fact that COVID, quite clearly, staffing problems and demand increases. I totally get that. But maybe if we have to modify this, well, so be it. But I think the Council of Governors ought to be apprised of those developments, and so that we're quite clear about how the strategy is progressing, because this is one of our key tasks, I think, as a governing body. Yes, Yvonne, did you want to come back at all on? You started this. Very good question.
No, but I completely agree with you, because I remember when this was put forward, I made a comment against the great place to work. How do you define great? I do think you have to be able to measure whether we are making material progress or not. That isn't to decry any of the initiatives that are being undertaken, because they all seem perfectly valid on the face of them. But if there are factors that are impeding our ability to achieve the aspirations that we set ourselves out to do so, those need to be clearly identified. And the effect of, the 2 steps, 1 step forward, 2 back effect, as you've described, has to be clearly articulated to governors so that they understand firstly, that you have at least made one step forward, even if something else has dragged you backwards, but also whether we need to adjust. Because if things are not the same as when we wrote these aspirations, if things have moved on, there may be different interventions we need to consider, or we need to manage expectations better over timescales of achievement. So I completely agree with what Andy just said. I would like to see something come back which gives us a tangible measurement of progress, positive, negative, and held back against the targets we set ourselves.
Thanks, Yvonne. So we can take that back into the agenda planning, or maybe if it's more appropriate that we do a separate workshop so that there's really time to go into things in depth. Thank you.
Or possibly one for the Governor's Away Day. Just another thought.
I think it's a really good. I would like this looked at in some more detail. And also what Yvonne said on that. Remember asked that question. Abby, do you want to deal with that now while we're dealing with clinical matters?
Yeah, it's actually a number of questions. It's probably about 4 or 5 questions. So I'll try and be as succinct as I can. So the first part of the question is that, is there a problem with provision of care coordination within Oxley's? And I would say no, there is no problem with the provision of care coordination. I think one thing that has happened over the last few months is that nationally we're moving away from care plan from CPA, and we're moving more. The national direction is to reframe the care that we provide, so that it's not within CPA, but it is around making it very personalised and individualised. So that is what we are working on, the process of how to do that. So when you ask what are the TOS plans to address this, we have got a team within my quality improvement team who will be project managing what we move from in terms of CPA to ensure that we're providing this personalised care that we're being asked to do nationally. But it's something that we have already been thinking of, that CPA has probably had its day, and we need to look at a better way of managing people's care. What is the transparency towards patients around this? People are given information at every point along their assessment journey as to what their interventions will be and what is available. So it is very transparent and they are kept informed. How does this impact on the quality of care? We are still providing nice concordant care for the people that come within our service. It doesn't really affect assessment and discharge. There is an increased demand, and we've already spoken about waiting times, but it doesn't really have an impact on re-entry to service. It doesn't mean that our thresholds have changed. It just means that we're doing things a bit differently and working with primary care and the voluntary sector. And the last part of the question is a bit more difficult to address, and I may need to come back to you on that. In terms of immediate and forecast barriers, the main barrier we have is around staffing and our staff turnover, and we've got various interventions or options that we're looking at. And I think we've spoken today about the graduate practitioners that started with us today, because we're having to look at how we deliver care in a different way, but ensure that people are still getting the care and intervention they need. So that's just a very succinct way of answering all those questions.
Thank you, Abby. Ravimbo?
Thank you so much, Abby. And it's helpful to understand that you are identifying the care program approach as as what care coordination comes under. So I'm wanting to understand, if the term is not care coordination going forward, what is the term? Because I am unclear if care coordination still continues, because it seems you're saying that it is ending because it is part of care program approach.
Care coordination, it will be. it's at the moment it's being called personalized care. So somebody will need to have a named professional who oversees their care. So I don't think we've settled on a name yet, neither. It's just a named clinical professional is what the national guidance is pointing towards at the moment, but it won't be within the care program approach.
Okay, but the idea of coordination, having a person coordinating somebody's care is still going to be there?
Yes, yes.
So this is what I'm asking about, really.
Yes. Yeah. So there will still be a lead professional for that person.
So my question really is around the idea of a lead person for the professional and how that is working for clients, because I do recognize that it is about being intervention based rather than the CPA approach going forward. So what I'm trying to understand is, where clients are actually open to services, they can't get help at A&E because they're told that they are open to a service and they should go to that service. They go to that service, they are told to go to A&E. And clients have to speak to multiple people and get turned away. Clients say that they feel unsafe for themselves and for others, and they still get turned away. Clients are in crises and left on their own. So, and also my understanding is that currently, whilst care coordinators is still the service being delivered, that there aren't any, or at least during the month of August or September, there weren't any care coordinators available for allocation. And this wasn't only to do with the summer holidays, but just that there were no care coordinators available for allocation. So this is where my question is really focused on, that yes, there is a transitional process that is going on, quite a number of transitional processes. And I think that Oxley's is really, and obviously your team and your department as well, is really looking at this from a very logistical and effective way. But what I'm trying to say is that there are immediate issues that service users are struggling with right now. So I would wonder what the thoughts of your thoughts may be to that, or the thoughts of anybody else.
Yeah, we are aware of the issues, and I think sometimes it does get clouded in whether somebody is on the care program approach or not. And it's only when you are on the CPA that you will be allocated a care coordinator, which shouldn't be the case. We should just be looking at what your needs are and ensuring that you have the right support around to meet your needs. And this is what this will give us the opportunity to do. So at the moment, what the Community Mental Health Directorate is piloting is something called a care team approach, where there are a group of people around that are supporting people, whether they're starting with people on CPA, but the plan is to expand it out so that patients' needs are being met, rather than waiting for someone to be under CPA and wait for care coordination. So we're on a journey, and as you said, it is transitional. But I do hear what you're saying in terms of how people are experiencing things at the moment.
Thank you.
Sorry, Claire's made some comments as well in the chat, which are worth looking at on there. So who have we got? Sorry, Ravindra, I cut you off. Did you want to say anything else?
Just one final comment. Perhaps suggest that I don't necessarily feel that I've had a response regarding the gap during that there is right now, and I also just aware that what we are both saying, and I think what we're all looking for, is for there to be a key person, whether we're calling them care coordinators or the care team, or whatever the term is going to be long term. The idea is for there to be a key person. And what I'm saying is, whilst there isn't an availability of care coordinators in some areas to be allocated, and there isn't a key person, that means that people are being left without support. And this is my concern, especially when not only recently I'm aware of people of a specific case of seeking support, explicitly explaining concern of harm to self and others and being turned away. And this is not, I believe, isolated. So I do have concerns about that there is a gap that is worth perhaps we address.
Thank you, Ravimba. That's really, really helpful discussion there. I think I'll come to Cassandra next, please.
I think I'm just going to echo. I think Ravimba explained that absolutely beautifully and really well exampled. We work Bridge. So I'm partnership governor for Bridge Support. So we provide your friends some forensic service for you, but we also work in Greenwich, providing supported accommodation and support to individuals in the community. And I would absolutely echo Ravimba's concerns. We have ongoing concerns. We continue to raise our ongoing concerns about the care coordination issues. So I think my main point is that there is a problem. I think that you're doing something to address it. Sorry, I think you're doing some problems to address it, but I think we need to own that there is a problem. I hope you can hear me. I can turn my camera off. Is that better? Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
That's fine, thank you.
So yeah, we need to own that there is a problem. I'm not disputing that you guys are looking at something and approaching it differently, but we have had a major problem in terms of recruitment of care coordinators, retention of care coordinators, loss of local knowledge about how the systems work, who the clients are, all of those things. So I really appreciate that you're doing something to change it, and I think that's the right way. But I think we need to start with appreciating that there is currently a real problem on the ground with gaps in care coordination, and I think Ravimba's illustrated that really well. The other question I want to ask is, we understand that you're moving from CPA, but what are the conversations you're having with partners about the move from CPA? Because I don't think those are being had. So, for example, the moment entrance to our services, to the supported accommodation and the support that we provide in the community, is for those people who are on CPA. So how is that? Because we've got to have some kind of entry requirement, otherwise it would be open to everybody with a mental health problem, and these are social care funded services. So we just need to understand that. So I would really urge conversations about how your changes are going to impact the partners that you're working with, because I don't think we're having those at the moment. But I appreciate this is a work in progress. So yeah, just my points from there.
Thank you, Cassandra. Rebecca, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if I'm going to muddy the waters a little bit. I'm not at all sure, because from my impression is that you're talking about people with mental health needs. But I'm very aware that within some of the boroughs that we work within, when we're discharging people from hospital, we have some care coordinators for some boroughs, and we have what they call a discharge to assess process, D2A, a process as well. And my understanding, being on the ground, is that the D2A process is far from ideal as well. But that is just a personal view. It's not the view of any particular organisation. It's just what I've noted. And I don't know if this ties into the lack of care coordinators in that earlier discussion, but clearly when we work with teams with care coordinators, it works really well. And when we work with teams without care coordinators, it's really much more difficult.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rebecca. Ife or Abby, do you want to finalise on this one, please?
Yes, just a couple of things to say, if I may. So I don't know if the Council of Governors are aware of what we've got on our board on our BAP, but we do in fact have the CMHD on our BAP, on our risk register, our board risk register, and that's for reasons such as this. I cannot sit here and say to you that we've got the exact number of care coordinators we did across Oxleys, nor can I say that they're all as experienced and knowledgeable as we would like them to be. There has been flux, people have come, people have left, And the second thing to say in response to you, Cassandra, of course, is that what we talked about earlier this morning in getting in just under 24 graduates is the beginning to then begin to think about how we can use them to address some of the gaps we have, as Abby has stated. And I expect that as part of that process, there's going to be a conversation with our partners. So make no mistake about this. We are absolutely clear. I am clear that this is not something that only Oxleys can address. We need our partners to be part of this, part of the discussion, part of the delivery, and it's just a timing thing in terms of when we get partners involved to just agree who does what how. It's a real challenge right across, certainly across London, more so in South East London, less so in Oxleys, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Cassandra, do you want to come back?
Yes, I suppose, just following up on your sentiments around it's around timing. It is around timing, but it's also take us with you. Don't just leave, don't just do something internally and then tell us. It's much easier. You'll get a much better reaction. We've had multiple Oxleys reorganisations of the community health teams, and you very rarely take your partners with you. If you take your partners with you, we can provide support for the people that we both jointly work. So rather than just sort of wait and then announce, do take us with you. Talk to us along the way, because it's a much better partnership that way.
Thank you, Cassandra. Rebecca, did you want to come back in? Suzanne, please.
So I just wanted to ask a question. I should probably know the answer to this, but I don't. So in terms of this being a transitional phase and we're on a journey, what's the point at which we expect to have reached the destination? But what's the plan about when this new approach post CPA will be fully implemented?
As far as I know, it's just been announced in the last few months that the direction of travel is to do away with the CPA. There hasn't been any firm guideline as to when we all should have implemented anything different. So that's what I did know. And part of what we were doing in Oxleys was more about how we address some of the gaps that colleagues have picked up today. And given that announcement that CPA will cease, we also began to think about what we will do differently. And I know that Lorraine has been to discussions with NED to share the ideas that we have, and I'm sure that we'll bring that again to a broader way just to share those ideas. But the answer to your question is that there isn't yet a date. We're testing. So my non-executive director colleagues will know that when we put out, when we invited applications for these graduate roles, we got about 80 applicants that we thought were really good applicants, but you just cannot bring people who never worked in mental health into a service and let them loose on service users. That's why we've taken 24 of them to then think about what their needs will be, how we ensure they're adequately skilled, how they're supported, etc., as a trial, to then see how many more we can bring on, and also to test the model that we've got in mind. But I will perhaps go back to Lorraine and colleagues and see whether we could bring something either here or to the net to be a bit clearer about timelines for delivery.
Andy, do you mind if I just comment on the point that Ravimbo made about sort of people who are seeking care needing to know who to talk to? Because when we discussed the care team model, and it was fairly briefly at a Strategic Away Day, at the last one or the one before that, I certainly had some concerns then that if you move to, I mean, it sounds like a kind of matrix working, you know, that you're going to have a number of people who are going to be cooperating and collaborating to provide you with care. And I think the only for me, the slightly scary thing about that, if I'm a service user, and I think this is what Revimbo was perhaps reflecting, is that you don't know who to talk to when you want to get something sorted out. And you know, so it probably worked very well when it's working, but when things start to go wrong, the question is, how do we manage to pick that up? And as a service user, who do you go to get it sorted? So I'm just wondering whether it would be appropriate for us to have a little bit more information a bit further down the line about exactly how the care team approach. I know it's being piloted a little already, isn't it? Is exactly how it's going to work, and to really take on board, I think, the anxiety that service users may have, and carers as well, about who they need to go to if things start to go a little bit awry.
So an update in due course, Iffy, please.
Yes, certainly. Yeah.
I think that this was a really, really good discussion. The discussion that came out of the strategy and then Revimbo's question has obviously sparked a lot of interest in a range of really serious clinical matters, which is exactly what the Council of Governors is here for. So I'm very grateful for that discussion. We have to finish at 1700. So we will now move on to the membership committee update. Zara, please. Is Zara with us? We have a paper, Sally, do we not?
We do, yes. So the paper is in the pack. If people are happy, I'll just speak to that. So Zara has taken over the membership of the membership committee, and at the most recent meeting at the beginning of September, and talked through communications with members, and also plans to increase membership in particular key constituencies, and also about talking through the annual members meeting and plans for that, which are on the 13th of October. Jo is the person that's leading our development of that event, so she's been able to pick up those discussions and feed into the organisation of the event directly. So obviously the paper is quite full. If there's any questions, Jo or I could try and answer those or pass them on to Zara.
Are there any questions? I suppose we're actually looking at both 14 and 15, aren't we, at the moment on this? Are there any questions on any of those matters to do with the membership committee update or the Council of Governors business? Sally, did you want to add anything more to item 15? Because we've sort of put them both together as far as I can see.
Andy, yes, you've taken them together. Yep. So I mean, the item 15 is really the confirmation of the elections that took place in the summer, and we will welcome the new members of the Council of Governors at the annual members meeting. That's where people's role finishes and starts. So we're looking forward to that event. And so within the papers are the declaration of the elections for everybody to note. And just to note that Tina Strack is taking on the role FOLA on the Governor Standards Committee.
Okay, well done. Thank you
very happy to take any questions.
Any questions, colleagues? If not, thank you very much indeed. And we come to any other business. I haven't been notified of any, but is there any other business from anybody? If not, thank you very much indeed. That was a really good meeting. So thank you for your attendance. I'll repeat my thanks to all the staff at Oxley's and to our partner agencies for the incredibly hard work through. I always say I'm not going to use that term unprecedented again, but in unprecedented times, they really are. I don't think anyone's seen anything like the pressures they've seen right now. I did say I'd like us to meet in person if possible. It's not a direction. We are, so Sally will canvass people's opinions, but I would look forward to us meeting in person in December with some mince pies. I think it'd be really nice if we could. Anyway, thanks very much indeed, everybody. We'll bring the meeting to an end. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.